Northern Power Women podcast. For your career and your life, no matter what business you're in.
Welcome to April, welcome to spring, and a new episode of the Northern Power Women podcast. It's episode 22. We're only as strong as our weakest link. I'm Sam Walker, and this month we hung out in Leeds, discussing senior leadership roles for women, the ghettoising, or not, of business awards, and life-changing books.
Do you know what? You can do anything. You can be in a weird environment, it can be really unfamiliar, it can be run by structures that aren't what you expect and don't like, and you can still rock it.
In the big interview, you'll get to hear from the first ever female chair of the Scout Association, Anne Lim, educator, trailblazer, and butcher's daughter from Moss Side.
Always remember that, you know, you're only really as strong as the weakest link in your chain, and actually if you ever leave anybody behind, the chain breaks. So I would always say look to the weakest and pull them up, and if you do that, you yourself will be the stronger for it.
And in Ask The Hive, if you want to change your career direction, how best to repackage your skill set?
All the things you've done within that business, how you've dealt with people, how you've dealt with really, really boring paperwork, all that you can completely do in any job in any industry.
But first, I really hope you managed to join us for the superb evening that was the 4th Northern Power Women Awards, a night of commemoration and celebration, headed up, of course, by the founder of Northern Power Women, Simone Roche.
Well, do you know what? It has been a magnificent march, with a month culminating in the 4th Northern Power Women Awards, sponsored by Manchester Airports Group, in front of a record-breaking engaged audience of 820, hosted by our very own Sam Walker, who was totally awesome despite a wardrobe malfunction. It happens to the best of folk. You won't be surprised to hear that we trended #1 in the UK, as we heard from Trisha Williams from Manchester Airport, Metro Mayor Andy Burnham and Baroness Helen Newlove. We celebrated 10 winners, 3 commended, and we introduced our new 2019 Future List and Power List. I have to say, it was a jam-packed stage right at the end, and we love working with MSP Global, who put everyone's name in lights, ACG, who amplified the conversations, and Burnley College, who helped us launch our We Can campaign, which we urge you to get involved in. Please, #WeCan, and share what you are going to commit to. Not what you're going to pledge to, might do down the road, but what you're going to commit to doing to accelerate gender equality from the North. And we're sharing it across all of our social media platforms. So thank you in advance for weecanning. March is International Women's Day, but really goes into a month now. So we were part of the Women in Leeds digital launch event, which happens in May. We hosted an Unleashing Your Superheroes webinar with Edit Development. We had more International Women's Day extravaganza with panel events at KPMG with Michael Page. We also attended the Rose Review launch. And I loved comparing the launch of Rise, which is running for the rest of the year in Liverpool, celebrating cultural achievements of women across the city. Just taking a breath. We continued on with our power circles, hosting them with KPMG in Manchester, Leeds, and a brand new outing in Liverpool too. Again, about bringing these influential voices together to make change in the North. And just to finish the month, I was delighted to help launch the Unity Collective, which is a new group at Liverpool Football Club, again working across disability, gender, ethnicity and race to really accelerate and make them an employer of choice. So love working with them. And I think I finished the month opening the stock exchange down in London, as part of being on the board of the Gender Network's 10th anniversary. So I think mainly I'll take a lie down in April, but congratulations to everyone who was celebrated at the Northern Power Women Awards. Thank you to all our sponsors and category winners. And I really hope Sam can go off and get a new frock now. Thank you. See you April.
Thank you so much to Simone for reminding me of that awful moment in my life where the zip on your dress breaks 4 minutes before you stand up on stage in front of 800 people. But we got through it together, right? No one noticed a thing. It was all okay. I'll get over it at some point. Now, let's get on to this month's discussion. Now, for episode 22, our brilliant panel of 3 got together at Sky Betting and Gaming in Leeds. And as usual, we were in front of a live studio audience. Well, hello. Here we are again. Another fantastic afternoon here in the north. Today we are in Leeds, and thank you to Sky Betting and Gaming for being our host this afternoon for the recording of the panel for episode 22 of the Northern Power Women podcast. If you haven't heard many of these podcasts, go back, peruse through our back catalogue. We've had so many conversations all across the north with so many brilliant people. And today, thank you to our three panellists who join us. Yasmin Akhtar, she's the Early Careers Recruitment Manager here at Sky Betting and Gaming. Also, if you're thinking, I know that name, that's because she is on the Northern Power Women Future List, of course. Congratulations for that. At Sky Betting and Gaming in Leeds, she heads up and has developed the Early Careers proposition, ensuring the company have a unique offering for early talent. Nice to see you, Yasmin. Thank you very much indeed. Big hello to Ed Thewlis as well, who's the CTO for the Data Shed. It's both a data product development house and a data consultancy. Ed's founded the Data Shed with his business partner Anna Sutton 6 years ago. Their business grows over 100% year on year. Fantastic stuff. And last but absolutely not least, Nicola Hallworth-Rudd, who's Regional Director for Michael Page. What did Michael Page do?
Michael Page, recruitment.
Recruitment. It's Michael Page International in Yorkshire. 3 other passions in life. Coaching cricket. Ooh. Giving the women in her life the confidence to stand out, and her sons. Sometimes not, it says here. Any parents will know that feeling very well indeed. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. OK, for question number 1 then this afternoon, the National Business Awards have just released some research which reveals the average UK business now has a senior leadership team that 41% female. So that's the latest research. I want to ask the panel this afternoon, is this reflected in your sector? Are women more visible in senior roles, essentially, I suppose, a year on from the gender pay report? I'm going to start with you, Nicola.
So having done a bit of research into this, knowing that I was coming here today and speaking to Women in Recruitment Group, I don't think 41% is that representative. I think we're a bit less than that in our sector, and we've not really seen a noticeable move in the last 12 months. I think the main problems are it's a sales environment. We're hugely reliant on our networks. If you take time out to run a family, then you're coming back to new networks. There's also a bit of an old boys network in there, and I think when you work in those male environments, slowly over time your confidence gets knocked somewhat. It may stop you going for those senior roles that are uncomfortable anyway. But at Michael Page, we launched a Women at Page programme in 2012, which was amazing, to try and focus on getting that split right. It focused on returners, it focused on confidence, skills, opportunity, and we managed to take our percentage of managers from 41% to 49% this year, and I managed to get our directors from 25%, amazingly, to 42%. There's still loads more we need to do. There's still not enough senior females, but you can make a huge difference.
It seems so, but with a concerted effort. This isn't going to happen as if by magic.
Exactly right. You can talk about it, but you've actually got to do it. You've actually got to make those changes. You've got to empower the women to make those changes, but you've got to influence the people in charge to accommodate them.
Ed, you know, working in tech as you do, I know my husband works in a similar field of you. He works in data science, and he recently went on some big new recruitment drive for his company, which is an international company. There was a big get-together. There was 100 new recruits there. 2 were women. Just 2 were women. And he said there's an issue with even getting women in at the start, let alone seeing them proceed and watching them proceed through the ranks.
Well, it's tech. Unfortunately, that's the case. It's been, back to the old boys network, historically tech is blokes. It's looking for us. Anna and I are 50% equal shareholders. That's, that's very easy to do when there's only 2 of you. We are currently recruiting as well, looking for 10, 15 new people. Wow. And we're seeing exactly the same thing. If I put a role out, I'll probably get a nice cookie-cutter, middle-class, white, mid-30s male, like me, and maybe 1 or 2 females. But that's usually it. There are very, very few coming through. We're actually finding in more junior roles, we're getting many more. So back to the point about women in leadership, I think that's going to take quite a lot of time, because you can't just pop those into that position of leadership. You need to make sure you've got the structures and mentors and coaching around them to get them to that position. But equally, exactly the same as you do with any junior males coming through.
So that's interesting that you not only talked about gender there, but you talked about race and you talked about class. And we've talked before actually on the podcast, haven't we, about tech having a bit of a class issue as well, and that there weren't many working class people coming into tech. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think for us that's slightly different. We don't prescribe having a degree. We don't think it's necessary. I mean, I don't use my degree very much anymore in my role. And we've got several people coming through that have not been through even sort of A-levels. So actually there is an opportunity there to pick it up and learn. It's actually quite vocational in many respects.
Well, better route in, actually, via non-university channels for tech for a lot of the time.
Can be, absolutely, yeah. You learn the right way of doing things as opposed to being indoctrinated into the you must look like this and wear Converse and jeans.
He's wearing Converse and jeans, yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I think that the problem still exists, and it will exist for a lot longer because we've got these old boys who are not going to die off anytime soon. So we've got two options. We can either try and influence them, change their way of viewing things. So actually, these things can start changing at the top and all the way through, or we watch it progress and we try and do everything we can to make sure that when they go away, we've got people ready to take over who are a bit more open-minded.
We don't want anyone to die. I think we just make that point. I'm going to come to the lady in the audience in just a moment because I just want to get... I love the fact someone's keen for me to lunge so early on in the day. Yasmin, you deal specifically with new recruits and with young recruits. What are you seeing here at Sky Betting and Gaming?
I think we've made a lot of concerted effort over the past 3 years since running the graduate programmes. I think initially betting and gaming as a whole, it can be a very male-dominated industry, and I think we've made quite a conscious effort, not just with women in leadership, but some of our younger females as we go out to universities to actually give them a platform to showcase themselves in the right places. And I think when you're going out and speaking to young women and men and trying to encourage them to come into an environment, they need to be able to see that it is all inclusive. And I think what we've done as a business, when we've kind of thought, actually, why aren't we getting women in leadership? Why aren't we getting women in tech? What can we do to make a change? And I think it's kind of been on us to say, right, how do we change these recruitment campaigns to make them more reflective of the people that we have here? So in the first year that we started the graduate programme, and as is and probably always will be the Sky Betting and Gaming, where it was all a bit rush, let's get to market and see what we get, being completely honest. And the demographic that we got in terms of offers and ratio was very reflective of the demographic we had here at the time. In terms of 80-20 split, 80% males and 20% females. And we were like, well, what can we do to improve that? And when we sat down with the leadership team for the third year intake, they were like, right, well, we want 50-50. And me trying to be realistic with the leadership team as it was at the time, they could be quite passionate when they think things can be done a certain way. I just explained that, it's not an overnight thing. As you were saying, Nicola, there's still a lot of work that we have to do. But by a few small tweaks, being more face front at the university, showcasing the right people at the right times, showing that talent across the board, I think really helped us. And again, changing the recruitment campaigns, the video that we went out with, the marketing material that we used. And actually, when we came to offers in the third year of the graduate campaign, it's actually 63% female, so absolutely smashed it for the leadership team, which was great. And it's something that I'm particularly proud of, but it's not something that we can kind of rest on our laurels with. We need to keep doing stuff like this and going out and speaking to people and saying, you can do this, you can do anything that you want. And I think going back to your point, Ed, about actually giving access to people from all kinds of social mobility and paths, when we recruit our early talent, we don't specify by degree discipline. It's about attitude, isn't it? Not aptitude. And you can teach people anything if they've got those core values. That's what I think, anyway.
Again, we go back to, if you keep advertising in the same way, you're going to get the same results. You need to think differently. Right, I'm doing my first lunge of the podcast. Yes, fabulous audience member.
Hello, I'm Jem Henderson. I'm the Entrepreneur Engagement Manager for Tech Nation, and actually one of my massive passions is about working class voices in tech. I was homeless when I was 16 years old, and obviously that was a big struggle to kind of get over. I was signed off sick with mental health problems. But I think one of the problems that we see is these things are fabulous, and Northern Power Women, we're putting women front and centre. How can we do the same thing for working class people? Because who are our working class icons in tech and in other sectors?
That's a good point. I'm gonna revert to you, Ed.
I suppose it's, as with all these things, trying to target the initial channel you can go down to find those individuals, because it'd be very difficult for me to walk into, I'm, middle class as it comes pretty much. I'm the cookie cutter IT person basically. But for me to walk into a working class environment, be able to communicate effectively to encourage people to go through it, it'd be a very difficult thing for me to do. We find that lots of ex-forces people who might have gone to the forces because they didn't maybe want to go to university and like that. Lots of those can come to us. So we've got a few of those ex-forces people that can go out and share with their sort of wider circles. The major challenges, though, I think, education plays such a big part in that as soon as you lose that constant contact through GCSE and A level, trying to get a coherent message across to people is very, very difficult. So I can't imagine that many working class people would hear about our latest data meetup, which actually it'd be a great place to come and learn, just a start of a 10. Here you go, this is what we do. And I genuinely don't know the answer to that one. I know that we've had some great success more by luck, more than by active planning. So I'd be interested to hear what everyone else thinks.
Yeah. Let me just run. Nicola, you wanted to say something else first, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a number of charities and academic institutions that could probably really help, that don't focus on the so-called elite. If you look at places like Leeds City College, if you look at some of the charities for the homeless, so to speak, then I think you can probably focus on trying to get hold of them, trying to educate what you're looking for, but you probably need to then change what you look at when you're recruiting and how you support them once you have recruited them, because I guess the needs might be somewhat different.
And just a final word from you, Yasmin.
I think I kind of toy with this question quite a lot, and I think, does it go back to something as simple as how we're educating children at school and the curriculum and what we can do to give accessibility to everybody? Because I think the problem is with us, talking about the skills gap and saying how prevalent it is and how we're really struggling to get the right people. Are we teaching kids the right things at school? I don't personally think that we are, and I think it goes down to something as simple as saying, right, this is what you can study. I think there's still a lot of element of vocational roles, I guess, and that being the correct thing to do. But I think we have to be really realistic about where business is going and where the roles are going to be, and they're all in digital and tech. So how can we, I guess, complain about the skills gap if the education isn't right? And it's something we've been discussing quite frequently, I guess, as part of the Leeds Digital Board. What do we need to do to give accessibility to more people and create opportunities for more people? But I think it's the curriculum that probably needs to change first, to make sure that we're giving that chance to everybody at first, and giving them the opportunity to choose the right routes for themselves, and that way educating the parents at the same time, because if the parents don't know, then children aren't going to know either. And we're not all in that privileged position to have parents that are, I guess, digitally literate. I mean, I know, my mum is not great on her iPhone. I hope she doesn't listen to this. I'm really sorry. But I think, everybody's got different levels, and we have to address that. I think there's a multitude of things that we should be doing on that basis.
Well, it goes back to you can't be what you can't see, and I think we say that pretty much every month here. And actually, if you listen back to an earlier episode, there is a whole Ask The Hive section about how to target young working class people for tech recruitment. I think how long ago, I can't think what episode it was, sorry, but if you look back through on, say, iTunes, there will be a list on there, and there was a whole big discussion about it. It was really interesting. Yes, one more lunge.
Hi, just a follow-on question about the value of work experience in context of this discussion, and what the panel were doing to encourage those opportunities.
Okay, Yasmin.
So I think something that we've created over the last couple of years, as well as the graduate programmes, is we've decided to do 1 year's what we call internships, where actually they're university placements. So they give accessibility to people who are at university who want to actually come in and learn a bit of a trade. But how we've done it is to address the digital skills gap by saying, well, actually, we can't complain that there's a skills gap if we're not willing to give opportunities to people, because our hope from that is that they'll do a year, get some great experience here, because I think people appreciate, how valuable it actually is to get that. They'll go back to university. Sometimes they don't want to go back, but we encourage them to do so. And then we hope that they come back to us at the end of their degrees, and that kind of plants, I guess, the seed. If that's first years, second years, third years, we're making sure that everybody's got access to that. So it's something that is very, very small for now, might be a bit of a drop in the ocean, but we're doing it, and I think it will get bigger over the course of time.
Okay, thank you all very much. Look, if you want to continue the conversation, we see these panels as very much the start of a conversation for you to then talk about in your own networks. Do always get in touch. At North Power Women is where you can find us on Twitter. Of course, you can email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. Perhaps you want to hear some follow-up questions next month on the panel. But our second question this afternoon is that Leeds is being mooted as the new location for the new British Library North. I just want to know, and this can be, it's really open to you, this question, but what is the most valuable book you have read and why? And I'm excited to hear what you're going to say. Ed, let me start with you.
Oh, good, me first. So I read for primarily escapism. I know, sorry. Am I saying your stuff? So I tend to read sci-fi and fantasy books. But occasionally I'll get a book that has real stuff in there that I have to try and address. One I've read recently, which sort of it feels like it goes a little bit against the power women side of things, is a book called Extreme Ownership, written by 2 Navy SEALs. It's probably the blokiest blokey book you can imagine reading. Lots of
Does it growl at you as you open it?
Yeah, salutes you. But as I was reading through it, I think the reason I enjoyed it, because it's not my normal sort of book, was more that some of the key messages in there, the one that Anna and I really take away, is that it's very easy to look around and blame people when a problem seems to exist and you know it exists and it impacts you. If it impacts you, it's your problem to resolve, it's your response to resolve. So in the same way as I'm sat here today, Anna is very much in part of the women in tech sort of side of things, because we recognise it's our problem to fix. We're in here, we're in positions of leadership, so it's our job to go away and do it. There's other stuff in there about how to handle a gun. That's probably not too relevant for right now.
Well, hopefully not, but who knows in the future. Yasmin, the most valuable book you've read and why?
First of all, I think it's important to start with saying I think that could be potentially really fantastic news for the region, especially considering the announcement we've just had with Channel 4. And it's a really hard question because I've been reading lots since I was really, really little, and I think there's hundreds of books that I could pick out, but I was going to say I see reading as a form of escapism, so thanks, Ed, for stealing my line, but fine. But do you know what, I think most people probably do. When you've got such a busy lifestyle, it's so nice just to take a bit of a break and just relax. So obviously when I get time these days, I don't know if you've heard of an author called Philippa Gregory. She writes a lot about the Tudor court, and I think what history has prevailed and probably tried to sort of showcase is that actually the men in those courts were the ones that were directing everything that was going on. But when you read those books, it gives you a little bit of a different insight. So the other Boleyn girl is kind of like my bit of so when you have like a comfort blanket, that's my comfort blanket book that I read when I might be feeling a little bit down or to make me feel better. But yeah, it showcased just such a different side of the court for me, where actually the women were the sort of puppeteers and the orchestrators of everything that actually went on. So I think I quite like seeing a bit of a different side to that, I think. So
okay, I like that. That's going down on the list, definitely. Nicola, what about you? The most valuable book you have read and why?
So for me, I read a book when I was 17. And it was by a lady called Martha Gellhorn, who was probably a lot more famous than her book. So she was a 20th century war correspondent. Her mum was a suffragist. And she basically travelled from war-torn place to war-torn place, interviewing and feeding back to the UK, which one, wasn't a very safe job, and two, certainly not a very female job. And I remember reading this book called Travels with Myself and Another. And this is actually more about her travels as opposed to about her journalism. And she travels to the Northern Caribbean, she travels to China, Russia, Africa, and she has some views that in the context at the time are okay. Now you'd question some of them, but it made me feel like I could do anything that I wanted any time, and gender wasn't a thing. And my friends and I set a book club 10 years ago to make us read. Now we have kids and no time and big jobs. And we read lots of different books, and we read this again 2 months ago, and it absolutely reignited the same feeling of, do you know what? You could do anything. You can be in a weird environment, it can be really unfamiliar, it can be run by structures that aren't what you expect and don't like, and you can still rock it.
Give us the title again.
Travels with Myself and Another.
By
Martha Gellhorn.
Thank you so much. Who's ordering that? Yeah, everyone in the audience, pretty much. Anyone else got a book? And it could be, I don't care if it's Harry Potter or Mr. Man or whatever, but something you found valuable. Yes.
Hi, a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. It's a business psychology book, but not too much. It's basically quite prevalent for women in the fact that it talks about how just because you're organised and you can fit 6 million things into one day because you're wonderful and you can do it, doesn't mean you have to do. So it talks about the value you get from what's important to you in your job and what's important to you in your life and your family and everything else. So really kind of stops that guilt when you feel like you can't achieve everything you want to achieve. Just kind of puts your ducks in a row, if that makes sense. And with having family, work, other things going on, it's been a bit of a game changer. I hate to be that person that says a book changed my life, but it has actually changed my life.
Tell us the name again.
Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
I love that. Yes, another one.
I'm a bit obsessed with self-help books, so I have a big library of them. But The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's very much around mindfulness and being present in the moment and how that's where the power is. And that's probably my favourite. And I keep referring back to it.
And he is a name who's mentioned by so many other authors when they write their own books, actually. He's kind of the author's author, in a way, isn't he? Anyone else got any suggestions? A book they found really, really valuable? Everyone's being shy. Everyone's thinking, I really loved Bridget Jones' Diary, but I don't want to say. It's all right. Simone, what's yours?
Aesop's Fables.
Aesop's Fables? Yeah. Ah, yeah. Which one? Particularly? Well, I know the whole book.
No, but so my grandfather would take me to the library.
I'm going to lunge to you.
Now we're talking about libraries.
Yeah.
So my gags, or my grandfather in Scouse World, he would take me to the library after school on a Friday afternoon, and that was the first book where I got out, and I must have got it out about 5-10 times afterwards. So I think emotionally it is that book, and I think at the time when you're reading it at whatever primary school age, you don't necessarily think about the kind of bigger stories that it tells. But I remember revisiting it probably about 5 or 6 years ago thinking, gosh, am I going to be disappointed? And it wasn't. It's still but you see it you read it in a different way. But yeah, definitely that was mine.
Aesop's Fables. Thank you, Simone. And one final one. Yes.
I am another sci-fi and fantasy reader, but I read a book by a lady called N.K. Jemisin, Nora Jemisin. She's won the Hugo for every book in the trilogy. And having read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, I didn't realise how much I needed a book written by a black woman writing in that field until I read it and just went, oh my God, this is the best thing ever.
The book again?
The series is called the Broken Earth trilogy. The first book is called The Fifth Gate, N.K. Jemisin. Thank you. Well, we're sorted for our entire summer holidays now. Brilliant. Let's just start. We talked about the Northern Power Women Book Club before. Let's start it right now. Definite. It's already happened. Right. Okay. Our final question already. Goodness me. This afternoon. Now, last month saw, of course, the fabulous 4th Northern Power Women Awards. More than 800 people joined us to champion amazing men and women. Now, also last month, you might have seen an episode of the BBC comedy Fleabag. What a great programme. What a great programme. But it featured a Women in Business Awards. And the commentary, Women's Awards, it's infantilising, it's ghettoising, it's a subsection of success, it's the children's table of awards. Now, this started a discussion where I worked, but I'd like to know, what do you think of women's, and indeed, I suppose, any other subsection of society awards? Infantilising, ghettoising, or empowering? Yasmin?
I think it's fantastic that we can have awards that champions, all people's achievements, women's, men's, whatever. And I think diversity and inclusion is such a huge and vast forum as it is that there are going to be subsections of people that want to celebrate in their own ways, and who are we to say that they shouldn't do that? And I think, thanks to Simone, we're able to celebrate in the North, how great women and men are in the North, and I don't see that there's anything wrong with that. But I do think it's quite easy for people to turn around and say, to go the other way and say, actually, this is excluding certain people from this, or it's excluding men, or it's excluding mixed race women, or whatever it is at the time. So I think you can see it from both perspectives, but I just think it's actually nice that we're trying to push such an inclusive society and make ourselves into that kind of society that considers everybody's achievements, no matter what, I guess, race, religion, gender. So I think, why not? I don't think it's ghettoised, and I don't think it's, I don't think there's anything wrong with us having subsections. I think people should be pretty much entitled to do what they want when they want, really.
Nicola, what about you? I did talk to one woman at work about this. You said, I don't like women's organisations because it makes us look weak. It makes us feel like we need support, that we can't sit at the big table with the big boys. I'm loving the look on your face. I wish I could describe it. The sort of a quiet but furious thoughts going through your head. Please make your face into words.
Well, you're right. I'm quite torn on this one. On the one hand, I think there needs to be a platform for minority groups to celebrate and recognise the success and achievement and to be seen as best in class. Because I think in the more holistic awards that I go to, it's not like that. It's white man after white man after white man winning yet another award. And if you look at the tweets behind them, that's what they say.
There are still more men called John heading up on boards in FTSE companies than there are women, full stop.
There are more called Steve than there are BAME as well, which is just incredible, really. But on the other hand, I think if you take women as example, if you have women picking awards for women, presenting them to women in front of women, that's great, but you're not going to change the culture where that's not necessary. So I'm really torn. I think on balance right now, I think it's a really good thing because I think to win that sort of award gives you that push for your confidence that might have been knocked over the years to make you just step forward and go, do you know what, I can do this. And that support that women can give each other or the different minority groups is huge. So for the minute, yes, but I just wish it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, well, quite. And I know that we always, have men as part of the conversation here at Northern Power Women. And in fact, Simone, we've talked before about the fact you had some criticism when men have won Northern Power Women Awards, which seems quite counterintuitive in a way. But, Ed, your company, 50-50, owned by a man and a woman. What do you think of this conversation?
I think anyone that would suggest that any sort of celebration of success is a bad thing, you need to look at the person commenting on that, I think it's probably one of those old school people want to pop their clogs at some point soon. For me,
back to the death again.
Absolutely, it's very dark turn. It's the books I read. For me, I think it's a bit petty to say anything other than, well, actually, we've found something really good to celebrate. Let's go and celebrate it. Yeah. That's the whole point of it. It's not necessarily going to be the thing. Seeing that award isn't going to go and necessarily change culture. It's rewarding people who have attempted to change that culture. I give out tech awards. If I give out tech awards in my small organisation, does that mean I'm excluding everyone else? Well, yes, it is, because I want to actually celebrate these people here. In the same way as if it's north or south, it's just a smaller version of celebrating a really good thing. So yeah, I find the sort of general commentary around it quite amusing because it feels like I've got a gruff old man sort of sat there. Oh no, you can't do that sort of thing. Yeah. Whatever next. But I think that if we can't celebrate success in that sort of form, how are we going to do it? Do we need to have just general one world level award for general goodness of people? You've got to narrow it down at some point, and that seems like an appropriate place to do it.
Anyone else in the audience got anything to say on this one? Yes, I'm coming back round for another lunge. Yes.
It's probably more a comment than a question, which probably goes back to what Yasmin was saying about inclusivity. I'm really lucky. I work in a law firm, 72% female, which is quite unheard of. It's all mainly down to the leadership of the firm believe in flexibility, and not just for women who you would normally assume are the ones who need to be at home looking after children. And law is obviously an industry which is not well known for its flexibility, and it's the fact that because it's so open to the men and the women within the firm, it makes people tick, it makes people work when they can work, when they want to work. Everyone has deadlines, but it works really well. But it's the fact that it's open to everyone, it's inclusive, it's not just flexibility for the women, it's for the men as well, and it works brilliantly.
Exactly. Very, very good comment indeed. Yes, I'm going to lunge back to Ed.
Just on that point about law firms particularly, I saw a tweet from my oldest friend in the world, Amy Wright, this morning, who works at a law firm in Leeds, commenting on she's going to a senior meeting in corporate law, and there's about 12 people there, and she was the only female in the room. And in terms of, we work with lawyers, with accountants, with investors, and that, in terms of tech, yes, we've got a problem. But in other areas, I think there are actually some bigger problems. It's just that we're willing to shine the light on it.
Yeah. Really interesting stuff. Well, again, as ever, please keep the conversation going, keep it flowing. You can find us on Twitter at North Power Women. We're on Instagram, Facebook. You can even send us an email. How old-fashioned does that sound now? I know. Or phone us up. Oh, I don't know if we want to do that. But you can, of course, find us podcast at northernpowerwomen.com. Thank you to Ed Thewlis, to Yasmin Akhtar, and to Nicola Hallworth-Rudd as well. Thank you, lovely audience, for being here. Thank you. Big thank you again to everyone who came along, took part, and of course, thank you to our fabulous panel as well. Do keep your eyes open for the location of our next live recording. We will post the details on Twitter at North Power Women. Now, the big interview this month comes from Anne Lim. Born in Manchester, Anne was the first girl in her family to go to university, and she went on to become a top educator, and then the first ever woman chair of the Scouting Association. I asked Anne what being Northern meant to her.
Oh, being a Northerner has fundamentally made me who I am, I think. Being born actually at Stretford Memorial Hospital, as my sister will remind me, and then going to Moss Side to live, and being brought up in inner city Manchester in the 50s, it is such a seminal experience, and one which has shaped everything I've done, really. I mean, you've got to imagine the first Windrush generation, my dad, my family being white, but him being a butcher, us living above the butcher's shop in Great Western Street, and me playing out in the alleyway behind the butcher's shop, playing out with a little black boy who I didn't think of as black, who I never thought of as anything other than my friend. At a time when the country was clearly changing, and wind forward 60 years has fundamentally changed, and attitudes towards immigration and all the rest of it. So just for starters, that whole experience of a very interesting, but for me perfectly normal inner city life in Manchester has made equality of race, equality of everything, a key part of who I am, and has shaped everything I've done and all the decisions I've taken.
You stayed in the north to go to university, of course, to Liverpool.
I did.
But the first person in your family to go to university, what inspired you to want to do that then?
Well, it certainly wasn't my grandparents. I mean, my grandfather actually played for Manchester City, which is why we're lifelong City supporters. But after I'd done A-levels, he said, well, isn't our Anne going to get a job then? Because, of course, that's what you normally did. I mean, he meant that in the kindest possible way. I think because I had parents who were not really socially or intellectually ambitious, I don't think, but who had been able to give me the kind of education that they hadn't had, because actually 1960s in Cheshire, actually. I went to school in Marple, as it happens, but to a girls' grammar school, now Marple Hall School, but it was Marple Hall Girls' Grammar School then in the 60s. You were exposed to the opportunity to go to university. So the fact that, yes, I was the first in my family, I wasn't the first amongst that generation who went to university from a school that was, I suppose, giving ambition to younger girls that perhaps is more commonplace these days, but was less so in the 60s. We had a good sprinkling of young women teachers who were inspirational, I think, and who were encouraging. So the combination of them plus my parents' willingness, and dare I say it, quite politically provocative to say this, but it's absolutely true, the availability of a student grant. You know, I would not have been able to go had I not had some money from the taxpayer, from the state. It would have been more difficult. Then all of that just meant that I had the chance to go somewhere, and I did French from 1971 to 75 at Liverpool University. So only really went down the other side of Manchester in a way. It seemed like it's not very far away really, but it seemed quite far away there. And actually Liverpool was a very different place, as was Manchester.
Very different identity, yeah.
Very different identity. But they are the north and they are the northwest.
So then you move into education. As a working class northern lass in education, were there any times that you felt your voice wasn't heard? Because you were also a leader you were in a leadership role at a very, very young age.
That's a really excellent question. Not consciously is the answer to that. And I think that that's interesting, though, as I reflect on it, to think about what I was actually doing in the first 10 years of my career, because I was a French teacher. So I actually think I found my voice in another language, funnily enough. And being a teacher and teaching, actually mostly then it was O-level and A-levels around the Manchester area. In fact, here in Sale, where we're sitting, Adult Education Centre, and then FE colleges that are now Manchester, the Manchester College, did a stint at what was Withenshaw. Anyway, I think all of that was a way of that voice being heard, but I didn't think of it as being leadership. I thought of it as helping people transform their lives by learning a language. And I loved speaking, and I loved communication, and I loved being able to impart that actually love of France and love of the language to others. I didn't consciously think, oh, well, within 10 years I will go from part-time teacher to being a principal of an FE college. But actually that is what happened.
Yeah.
And then I found myself at the age of 34 as a principal of a further education college in Milton Keynes, which is in fact why I then moved to Milton Keynes and indeed left the north completely. And unlike, again, as it is the case today, I think for many people, you have a coach, you have a mentor, you have a buddy or a friend who may say, yes, you can do that. Or from quite an early age, you think to yourself, oh, I'd like to be X and Y when I grow up. The limit of my aspirations were, well, I'd love to be a French teacher, and my mum and dad saying, that's a great job because you'll have a pension. I never ever thought, well, I will lead an institution, let alone become a principal of 2 colleges, then a civil servant, and then a whole host of other things I've done. So I don't like to say that my career happened accidentally, because I don't think it was that. But I think a real difference is I didn't consciously plan it in a way that now many women, and it's a good thing, are encouraged to do, and I encourage women to do that now.
So in a way you were almost successful in spite of yourself. You had opportunities and you absolutely grasped them, but it would have been advantageous, you think, to have had that plan.
I think so, and I think it goes back to your first question about something to do with the northern roots and the kind of experiences I had. I think by nature I am somebody who is curious about the new, is somebody who explores and seeks, and isn't too afraid to try the novel and risk failure. But I think the fact that I took those opportunities when they came along and found I could do them, it turned out serendipitously that was okay. I genuinely think sometimes I probably could have done with a bit of a helping hand and some guidance. And I'm not saying I didn't have friends. I've had loads of good friends and other support. Yeah. But I do think what's so much more accepted now for men and for women, but certainly for women, is that you can think through your work-life balance, you can think through your ambitions, you can think through your failures, and share your successes with others. And that feels so much more liberating to me. And culturally, it was different in the 60s and 70s. And actually, as it happened, I'm a gay woman as well. Well, my God, you've got to even imagine that. I mean, I could own up to being a feminist, but actually even the thought of admitting to having relationships with both men and women, which in fact I have done in my life, although I've been with my woman partner now for 33 years, it just wasn't possible. So I think all of those things made me much more reticent.
Did you ever have imposter syndrome? When you found yourself as this senior leader in your early 30s, we hear about imposter syndrome so much amongst incredibly successful women. Did you ever suffer from that?
If my sister hears this podcast, and she probably won't, because my younger sister will be saying, oh my God, she's at it again. She'd say, if you answered yes to that, Anne, you would be, a complete and utter charlatan. You'd be lying through your teeth. Because I think her perception would be I would never have felt that I didn't deserve to be there. The reality is I wouldn't have called it that because I didn't know that that was what we call that thing. Did I, however, experience the feeling that I couldn't do or I wasn't good enough to be able to do the job that I found myself in? Well, yes, I would have had. I did have some of those internal doubts. But I think the very nature of this, what I've talked about really, combination of my own personality plus perhaps some of the kind of quite tough situations I had to encounter as a child in a way, with a grit to being able to develop what these days you'd call a bit of resilience, to develop the coping mechanisms and strategies to just get on and get through and not be too public about it, you know. So I'm confessing, yes, to those inner doubts, but I wouldn't have made them known. And then once you get some success, you think, well, that's okay. It's kind of, it feels right to be here. But it's really only since my sort of early 50s that I think I've actually really felt, you know, I'm in, I have a right to be here, you know, whatever I'm doing.
It's interesting, isn't it? The number of women I talk to, and you think, surely she would never doubt herself ever at any point. We all do it. And you know, there've been whole podcast discussions about this actually, and why this does tend to be an inherently female thing. We could go on all day. You really advocated, Anne, for women throughout your career, actually, and more specifically, I suppose, in the latter part of your career when you've specifically worked with advocating women. What have you noticed about how attitudes towards women in senior roles have changed since you first started? Have they?
Yes, I think they have, because society's attitudes towards diversity and certainly an understanding of equality legally and inclusivity generally has changed, and you know that affects everything that we do. So culturally and socially there's a very different environment. That doesn't mean to say that if you are in any way a little bit kind of different or unique in a role that people won't still look at you, because I think it does still apply. But that said, I think one of the reasons why it's different now is because of that. However, I think when a woman who's not been in a role first goes into that role, people are always curious about it. So you could think of endless examples, certainly being the first woman chair of the Scout Association, which obviously is a role I occupy. Although Scouting has involved boys and girls for the last 27, 28 years now, it is a mixed youth organisation. It's still a curious phenomenon for some people, and certainly for some men, because obviously here we're talking about a gender divide. So I think you're right. I've always am a feminist, as I've said, and I've always advocated and tried to support and bring through women, and also to align myself with men who support women and develop women. That has been it is so important, and that's been important to me. But I think there's a curiosity always about the number of women. Even take the number of women in Parliament. It's still only 209 from 650 or something. So it's not even a third. And yet there are many more Northern voices and Northern women voices and the rest, and racially and sexually and in every conceivable way that diversity is reflected. But the numbers are still not anything like the half and half.
You mentioned your you being chair, of course, of the Scout Association. September 2015,
yes,
you took that role up. As you said, some people, what would the word be, reflective about perhaps the choice of a woman taking on that role. Why were you, though, Anne? Why were you so passionate about it? Why did you want to do it?
Well, although I say the North and certainly the grammar school education and university, as we've spoken about, shaped me, alongside that, actually going into brownies and guides, because you couldn't become a scout in the 60s if you were a girl, because that's the way it was. They were Boy Scouts. But the experience of doing what is to do with informal learning, to be amongst others and learn teamwork, to learn to be a volunteer, to learn to do things in a much more relaxed way, whether that's outdoors, which I did love as well, but also the kind of learning that you get that's not at school, the kind of experience that you get that's not at school. You can allow your personality to come through, and that did for me hugely. I was a chubby, if not overweight, perhaps not by these standards these days, but then I was an awkward, chubby little girl who actually wasn't unintelligent, but didn't possess the kind of conventional, bright intelligence that certainly at primary school immediately got you noticed. I was a bit airy-fairy. I was a bit away with the fairies sometimes, head in the clouds type stuff, and not good at some of those primary school things. In Brownies and then Guides, those talents and that type of way of approaching things were much more valued. So you could be a bit odd, you could be a bit different, you could be a bit quirky, you could be overweight, and people wouldn't make fun of you quite so much. So you didn't have to be so conventional. And that profoundly affected me, and I just felt valued and affirmed. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't at school ultimately either, but I'm just saying that was a very affirming experience. And I see that today with the diverse and inclusive approach we have in Scouting, and indeed the Girl Guides have as well with young women. It gives confidence, and it helps young people develop skills for life.
Looking to a young girl today, a young woman today, if perhaps she was looking to join the Scouts, I suppose, what advice could you give her about the challenges she is going to face in her life?
I meet an awful lot of young women through Scouting, and I learn so much from them. And the world is really quite a frightening place, actually. I'm saying this 3 or 4 days after one of those Girl Scouts, Jodie Chesney, was knifed and killed, and had only last November both been to Downing Street and appeared in the Remembrance Day service, which Scouts featured so significantly. And I have her very much in mind, because she is it's a terrible waste of life, and she is very typical of the marvellous young people that we have. I think what she did, in as much as I can say, and what I would say to others, is she lived her life by her own lights. And I would say to any young person, be who you are, value who you are. It might take you some time to find out exactly who you are, because we all have ups and downs. We all have to live with doubt and uncertainty and fear. But actually, we're all capable of great love and generosity and curiosity and creativity. And actually finding that balance within yourself and asking others to help you do that, and also working that out with other people, with your friends, with your families, with your siblings, through people at school, etc., through people in Scouting. That's what the journey into growth and learning and developing is about. I don't think anybody ever put it like that to me as a child, and perhaps I wouldn't put it like that to a young person, but that's kind of what I'd mean. What I certainly had, and I think of them as we just conclude this, is, I had teachers who just exemplified that. I had a guide captain and a brown owl who did that, who put in to practice their own values in the way that they try to live out their life. And essentially, that's what you need to do. And always remember that you're only really as strong as the weakest link in your chain, and actually if you ever leave anybody behind, the chain breaks. So I would always say look to the weakest and pull them up, and if you do that, you yourself will be the stronger for it.
Thank you to the brilliant and really inspiring Anne Lim. Whose life and career would you love to know more about? Do let us know. All you need to do is email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. OK, it's time now for Ask The Hive, a place where you can ask about any problems you're facing at work or concerns you have about your career, and the Northern Power Women Hive Mind lends you its wisdom. This month, if you spent your whole career doing one thing, but you want to explore something else, how do you go about it?
So in the past, I've been really successful at building localised food businesses, establishing them and selling them on. So what I've got now is a broad range of skills that I'd like to take forward into a new kind of career. But what I'm struggling with is applying those potentially into a bigger, broader role, and I'd ask for people who've maybe had similar experiences. What advice would they give me?
The best thing to do is think about the transferable skills that you've got from your past experience and how to dress those up for the jobs that you'd like to apply for, and maybe tailor your CV so that it fits the one you're particularly going for. You will find you'll be happily surprised that many of your skills will be absolutely appropriate for what you want to apply for.
So I read recently that when men are applying for jobs, they take a look at the criteria, and if they hit 50% of them, they will apply for it. Whereas when women look for jobs, they see the criteria and they won't apply until they hit 90% of them. And frankly, I think that's outrageous. What we need to do is we need to start applying for jobs like we're men. Just pretend you've got a penis, and just if you hit 50% of those, apply for it. And you never know what's going to happen, because we have all of these soft skills which aren't treated as valuable by job adverts, but actually when we get into work, they are treated as valuable, because they are. Women are really good at putting people together, at connecting, and that's really valuable for a business.
I would write down everything you've done in your business from setting it up to running it, and then take the word food out of it, and all of that will be transferable to the new job and CV you're looking to do. And just think of all the things you've done within that business, how you've dealt with people, how you've dealt with really, really boring paperwork. All that you can completely do in any job in any industry.
So I suppose with any job there's a whole range of people skills which you probably subconsciously pick up on as you go through your career. Those are definitely transferable. The ability to talk to people, negotiate, compromise, just get on with people is something that you're not necessarily taught, but is probably one of the most important career skills you can have.
I think because you've already been there and done it with those food businesses, you've already got a blueprint for success. So you can advise, startups and growing food businesses already. You could almost position yourself as an expert in that field. I think any startup, any consumer startup, would be looking for specialist advice, and people that have actually been there and done it is going to be really popular. So I think about really positioning yourself in the media, writing articles on LinkedIn, speaking to local press, and making sure you're out there. And I think that could turn into something bigger and broader, depending on the contacts that you make from that as well.
What you're feeling is really common, I think, nowadays, because lots of people change their role or change their careers later on in life and struggle to think about the skills they've got in any particular job that they could use in another, whatever he's talking about, transferable skills. Take a look at your CV and look at what you've done, but take the word food or take any reference to the food businesses out of it and think about finance, think about personnel and HR skills and managing people, think about product development or product management or buying, and think about all those generic business skills that there are that are needed, that are really valued, and then think about how what you've done already has proven that you've got those skills.
Thank you if you took time to offer your advice this month. Really, really appreciated. So next time, how to get out of bonding with your colleagues.
I really hate company away days where you have to do things like paintball and team building. I like my job and I like my colleagues, but this stuff I just can't stand. There's one in May and I just don't want to do it at all. What can I do? It's on a Saturday.
Do you know what? My blood also runs cold at the thought of a company escape room. But what would your advice be? Is it something she should even attempt to get out of? Or actually, is doing something out of your comfort zone what is part of working life? Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. You can either record a voice memo on your phone and email it to podcast@northernpowerwomen.com, or open up WhatsApp, add the Northern Power Women podcast on 07928 387 712. That's 07928 387 712, and you can send us your thoughts that way. All we need to do is hold the little microphone button next to the messaging box, say what you want to say, take your finger off, and the message will come straight to us. More on those instructions online at northernpowerwomen.com. Well, there we go for another month of great stories, great advice and brilliant ideas. Big thank you to listening. Please do leave us your feedback and your reviews wherever you get your podcasts from, and tell anyone you think who might enjoy what we do. Save the date. The next episode arrives for you on Friday, the 3rd of May. And until then, this is the Northern Power Women podcast. I'm Sam Walker, and this has been a What Goes On media production for Northern Power Women.